Johnny Depp, the Amber Heard impact of the narcissist. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. You'll recall 3 years ago that there was the trial where Johnny Depp sued Amber Heard for defamation, and he won. Back then, I scrutinised Amber Heard, placing her under the Tudor scope, and the determination was that she's a narcissist, and I provided sound and detailed reasons as to why that was. I also placed Johnny Depp under the Tudor scope, and the determination for him was that he was not a narcissist, but narcissistic. Armed with this information, this has enabled us to understand more about her behaviours and his in related videos. If you haven't had the benefit of watching the series about Heard and Depp, I'd encourage you to do so. There's a playlist that contains many videos about them. Those of you that have been involved with the narcissist will know the cost that it can extract from you. Indeed, you may still be experiencing it. Your self-worth and self-confidence plummet. Your self-esteem is shredded. You can experience financial problems as a consequence of the loss of money, the spending of money on lawyers, dealing with the haphazard and chaotic nature of the narcissist. You may have lost relationships with friends, with family. You may have had problems with your job as a consequence of the firefighting that you had to engage in respect of the narcissist, meaning that your attention was taken elsewhere. You may have been involved in child custody disputes which may not necessarily have gone your way. There's a huge cost that can be associated with the behaviour of the narcissist, where the abuse takes place in an intimate relationship, ranging from sexual, physical, financial, psychological, and emotional. People's sleep patterns are affected. Their weight may plummet or they may gain weight. They lack trust. Many of the people that I've consulted with have presented with such consequences of their ensnarement. And of course, it's not just the romantic ensnarement where this occurs, but it is also found in other types of ensnarement, from the familial to the social to the work-based. But what about the impact on a narcissistic individual such as Johnny Depp? Might he be able to shrug off what happened to him, whereby he was physically and emotionally abused? After all, he's a famous individual who's well used to being in the glare of the public eye, that he's wealthy. Presumably, he was able to shake it off and get on with his life. As you know, Amber Heard retreated to Spanish islands in order to assert control through withdrawal, although she has crawled out under her rock as of late. See parts pass him. But what about the impact on Depp? Well, an interview with Benji Wilson of The Telegraph provides us with some insight as to the impact that the narcissist Amber Heard has had on him. The interview takes place in a Budapest back street where Depp is attempting to do something he hasn't done in 20 years, which is direct a film. It's a biological snapshot of the Italian artist Modigliani, called 3 Days on the Wing of Madness. The film, which was released just recently, marks a big next step for Depp. It is his first work of any substance since he was, in his own words, dumped, shunned, booted, deep-sixed, cancelled, however you want to define it, by Hollywood after potentially career-ending allegations were made by his ex-wife Amber Heard during a succession of trials that aired some very dirty laundry in courts on both sides of the Atlantic. To recap, Depp and Heard, an actress 22 years his junior, married in 2015 and then divorced a year later. Heard claimed that Depp had abused her physically, an allegation he denied. A year later, Depp sued the Sun newspaper in the United Kingdom for an article that labelled him a wife beater. The judge ruled against Depp. Then in 2018, Heard wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post that referred to sexual violence and domestic abuse without naming Depp. He sued for defamation, leading to a 2022 trial in Virginia that Depp won. Thus, that is what he faced. And with that, there was considerable scrutiny of his personal life, allegations of poor behaviour on his part, and an expensive trial, along with, as he mentioned, the consequential impact that took place on his professional career. As being labelled as an abuser and a wife-beater, he found himself with people turning their backs on him. This is not uncommon. It is a tactic that is regularly used by narcissists to portray themselves as the victim when they are the perpetrator, because in their mind, they are the victim. And therefore, when the true victim starts to threaten the control of the narcissist by perhaps exposing the narcissist's behaviour to other people, the narcissist goes on the assault. What they do is challenge that individual, and they engage in smearing, pointing out to other people that I'm the one that's been hard done to, I'm the one that's abused. And often these narcissists can be very convincing. For Heard, of course, being a woman, there was this principle of the woman should always be believed as part of what came out of the #MeToo movement. But as the jury found, they didn't believe what she said about Depp. She was found to be the aggressor, and she was found to have defamed him. Nevertheless, the impact was similar. That before he could get to that point, people made their minds up about him in the way that many people make their minds up about the true victim, regarding them as the problem and the perpetrator as a result of the smearing by the narcissist. Through the allegations made against Depp, which in effect smeared him, he found himself cancelled, booted, shunned, deep-sixed, as he mentioned, and it had a significant impact upon his career and, understandably, also his finances. Now, some might suggest that him taking the reins of an art house project is the calculated act of a 62-year-old man keen to shift focus off his personal life and back onto his work, i.e. its deflection. That probably would be something that Amber Heard would accuse him of. Yet, the interviewer explains that everyone they speak to on set suggests it isn't the case, that Depp the director is driven by passion, not strategy. Al Pacino was involved in bringing it to screen. He and Depp had worked together back in 1997 on Donnie Brasco. And when the interviewer meets him, the interviewer explains that their eye is immediately drawn to a gigantic wine glass sitting in the window. On the side, somebody scrawled the words, "mega fucking pint." Depp catches the interviewer staring at it, and he says, "That might be the closest to art that I've ever gotten." It suggests that whatever else he says, his 3 years of very public court proceedings, which followed a loose trajectory from humiliation through to a form of vindication, have left their mark. You'll recall that the mega pint is a reference to an episode in which Heard's lawyer asked Depp a question about a video which appeared to show him destroying cupboards while drinking a large glass of wine. When the lawyer described the glass as a mega pint, Depp couldn't hold back a smile, and an internet-breaking meme was born. In the course of the conversation, Depp growls and mutters. At times he's close to incoherence, at others he makes magnetic, amusing company. He's keen to talk about the film and his unconventional approach to casting it. He talks about his involvement with Hunter S. Thompson, and he explains the quote, which is about how he talks about Hunter stating a quote from Dr. Johnson at the beginning of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, namely, "He who makes a beast of himself gets rid of the pain of being a man." Depp jumps in to clarify it's not that men are more in pain, but just in general. You can apply it to a woman too, of course. Notice how hasty he was to correct the situation, that it would appear that as a consequence of what has happened to him, he's hasty to ensure that he doesn't offend. There probably was a time where Johnny Depp would say things, not really caring for the impact that would occur. But here, he's at pains to ensure that both people can be affected, not just men. The interviewer explains that although Depp can meander, he's not unself-aware. He knows that the long-running skirmishes with Heard painted him as a misogynistic, violent drunk. the man who had it all, exhibiting all the worst traits of the over-entitled alpha male. He also knows that had he wanted to, he could have stepped out of the limelight for good, played his guitars, done his art, opted for the quiet life. With decades of filmmaking behind him, he says, "I don't have anything to prove." So why on earth is he taking the risk of putting himself out there again? One explanation is that he says himself is that he's nuts, but in actual fact, there's a streak in Depp that cannot resist inviting trouble. He recalls that in the early 1990s he was asked by an interviewer why American kids should pay any attention to a young actor playing an undercover cop busting drug gangs. And Depp said, "Well, that's easy because I started taking drugs when I was about 11. Then I went through the whole thing and then she asked me, 'Have you tried marijuana?' I went, 'Cocaine, heroin, I mean, you name it, because that's how I grew up. By the time I was 15, 16, I had a pretty decent chance at a doctorate in pharmacology and alcohol mixing and drinking.' That probably wasn't a great career move, but what he couldn't stand, he says, was people trying to make him into something he wasn't. I didn't like the labels. What they were desperate to do was just make me a poster boy. He's the new James Dean, they said. No, I'm not." Depp soon shrugged off these labels. And what it is interesting is that he still maintains that streak of being unconventional, that he doesn't want to be told what to do, not in the pathological sense of the way that the narcissist behaves, but simply that he still recognises who he is and the need to be himself. He later in the interview states that when he was geared up to be in the Harry Potter spin-off Fantastic Beasts, he was replaced by Mads Mikkelsen, having filmed just one scene. "It literally stopped in a millisecond," Depp says, "like what I was doing the movie. They said, 'We'd like you to resign.' But what was really in my head was, they wanted me to retire." His response, "Fuck you. There's far too many of me to kill. If you think you can hurt me more than I've already been hurt, you're gravely mistaken." When the interviewer asked Depp what he means by already being hurt, he tells the interviewer about his mother, Betty Sue. Depp was born in Kentucky in 1963, the youngest of Betty Sue and her husband John Depp's 4 children. The family would often move around, eventually settling in South Florida when Johnny was 7. Betty Sue, who's now dead, was violent and unpredictable. "She beat me with a fucking stick, a fucking shoe, an ashtray, a phone. It didn't matter, man, but I thank her for that. She taught me how not to raise kids, just do the exact opposite of what she did." It's evident that he doesn't see himself as a victim, even though he is a victim. That notwithstanding also from what Amber Heard had done to him, it still shows that he retains an inner resilience. In the interview, he does not come across as bitter for the way that Heard has treated him. Instead, he demonstrates this continuing inner resilience, born undoubtedly of his own innate selfishness and self-absorption. But the impact of Heard's abuse has been such that it certainly damaged his career, but he's certainly looking to bounce back from that. But beyond that, whilst there is a degree of caution in respect of some of the things that he says, it has not caused a long-standing alteration to his personality or views. It also hasn't left him in a situation where he has had to slink away to a corner and curled up in a ball and removed himself from life. He's returned to directing. He's continued to engage in the things that he's passionate about. And therefore, he has demonstrated the survivorship of the abuse that he has experienced. It's likely by virtue of the fact that he is narcissistic. This has equipped him with better tools to deal with it. He will not be as afflicted with emotional thinking to the extent that, say, an empath would do. He wouldn't be afflicted by the addiction to the narcissist. Undoubtedly, it has an impact upon him, most notably with regard to his career. But as a consequence of the higher levels of selfishness and self-absorption, the stronger narcissistic traits, this has actually helped him bounce back from what has happened and has meant that much of the abuse that she has met out against him has ultimately bounced off, and the greatest impact has been as to how it shaped the attitude of others towards Depp, something which hasn't caused him to go under. Accordingly, it's interesting to look at by the reading of this interview, and I've not gone through everything that's contained in it, otherwise it'd be too long, but to provide you with the highlights to demonstrate how Heard's impact has affected him, but how in many respects it ultimately hasn't had any long-lasting impression upon him, and also the reasons why that is. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.